I want to do a bit of a review of what we did at the end of last lesson. So if you remember, we did two things. We ran the Python code in two different ways. So if you go ahead and open up the terminal, the first thing that we did was we went into interactive mode in the terminal by typing in Python 3, press enter, you get those prompts, and then we did something like print hello world. And so whenever you see those three arrows, you're in the interactive interpreter and the prompt in Python. And then when we want to exit out, you can do Control C on a Mac or Control Z on Windows, or whatever it was on a Mac. And then we're back in the terminal. So we can go in and out of the interactive mode quite easily. And then the second thing we did was we used a script. So remember, we went to Sublime, and so we wrote print hello world in Sublime, and then very importantly, we saved it as a Python file. We called it hello_world.py. So if we go back to the terminal and I cd, back into CS110, I think we were, yes. And then if I cd into in class, and then you can see my list here, and I would cd into week 1, and then you can see the hello world.py, and then we did Python 3, and then a space, and then the name of the file. And if you start typing it and press tab, it will finish it for you. And you can see there it was running. So that was your in-class exercise 0, was to take a print screen of this, the way that you ran it with the script and the command line. So that's a little review. So we're going to be using both methods throughout this class of working with Python. So, program basics. So usually when we have a program, we have some kind of input, we do some kind of processing on that input, and then we have some kind of output. So with the very, very limited one line that we've been working with, we've been able to take in some input and process some output. So we can display output using print. Now, print is a built-in Python function. We will cover functions at great depth later this semester, don't worry. But just for now, you just need to know that it's a built-in Python function that displays output on the screen. And it takes an argument. So the argument that it takes is here inside the parentheses. And this is data or information that you need to give to the function. So you can think of arguments, so for example, like something that the function needs to run. So if I say print something, you're going to say, what do you want me to print? So then you have to tell it what you want it to print here as the argument. So here we're telling it to print hello world. Now, for input, what kind of input might you want from a user? What should we do with that input? Where should we store it? And how do we get access to that data? So in order to answer these questions, we need to introduce a concept called a variable. This is very important. A variable is one of those things that you absolutely must be clear on when you finish CS110. Now, this is from the book. So a variable is a name that represents a value stored in the computer's memory. I try to make it easier. Or a variable is just a name that refers to a piece of data in memory. You can also say a variable references a value. And programs use variables to access and manipulate data that is stored in memory. So let's take an example of this variable dollars. So we can create a variable dollars with an assignment statement, i.e. the equals sign. So we can say, you know, dollars equals 100. And in memory, we will have this variable dollars that is referencing this value 100. So here it's just saying the equal sign is the assignment operator, and this is either, you know, some value or some expression. So let's have a look actually and do this together in the terminal. So let's clear this and let's go into the interactive mode together. So go ahead and do that. So for example, we're going to create a variable dollars and we're going to assign it the value 100 by using the equal sign, and we have assigned it the value 100. So we can check if dollars is 100. Now in the interactive mode, you don't need to say print dollars. If you're using the script mode, you would have to say print dollars like that. But because we're in interactive, you know, in the prompt, we can just say dollars and it will return the value. You can't do that in the scripts. Okay. So we've just done that. Now, what happens when we want to reassign a variable? So here we are, happily we have dollars equals 100. Now, what if we said dollars equals 999? Okay. And then we check dollars, and dollars now equals 999. So what's happened to that 100? Well, let's do a little bit of whiteboarding. So just bear with me as I switch modes. Okay. So, sorry, I need to move this a bit. Okay. So we started off and we said, okay. So we said dollars is a variable and it's referencing a value. And the value is 100. Okay. Sorry, my writing looks really bad on the tablet. So here, dollars is a variable stored somewhere in memory. And the value 100 has another piece of memory where it's stored. So these two things are not the same thing. There's a variable dollars with its own piece of memory, and there's a value 100 with its own piece of memory. So what happens is when you go ahead and assign dollars to another value, like 999, then dollars stops referencing the 100 and it starts referencing this new value with a new piece of memory called 999. So this 100 still exists in memory somewhere. It's just inaccessible. No one can access it. There's no variable referencing it. We're not going back to it. Dollars is now referencing 999. So it's floating around in memory, taking up space, not being able to be used. So what eventually happens to it is that it gets garbage collected. So at some point, Python will come along and it will clear up that value 100 from its memory and clear up the space. So some languages like Java, for example, do garbage collection for you. Other languages like C++, you have to do it. So luckily, Python is doing it for us. But just important to remember that when you're thinking about variables, and I just want to make sure that this is something that gets noted early on, that the variable has a separate place in memory from the value. So they're not the same thing. So sometimes when you ask a student, what's a variable? You say, oh, it's the value, and it's not the value. It's referencing or pointing towards a value. Okay. As you progress further, you'll see why I'm laboring this point. I mean, in your CS career. Now I would like to introduce a very, very important topic called data types. And throughout the whole semester, you will constantly be asked about data types in quizzes, in midterms, when you're debugging your code. You'll be sharing your screen with me, and you might have a really complex piece of code, or maybe not that complex, but relatively so. And I'll be sitting there going, okay, what's the data type of this variable? So this is something that you definitely want to learn and get comfortable with. So we use data types to categorize different types of values. So for example, we have a data type called an integer. So when an integer is stored in memory, it is classified as an int. So an integer is a whole number. It's not a fraction. So when a real number, i.e. a number with a decimal point and something else after the decimal point is stored in memory, it is classified as a float. So here are two data types so far, an int or integer and a float. So let's have a look at these two first of all. So in order to examine data types, I want to introduce the built-in Python function type. So this is an important one. So this will tell you the data type of your variable. So let's go back to our terminal, and I'm actually going to pull so you can see this both. All right. So let's do this together. So we have a variable $_int, and that equals 10. Okay, so let's check it out. There it is, 10. Now let's check out the type of that variable. So we do type, parenthesis, the name of your variable. And you can see here it returns class int. So it's telling you that this variable $_int is a type integer. Right? Now let's do $float. So we're calling a variable $float. Let's give it a decimal point. Let's check that it's working. There it is. Now let's check out its type. So we say type underscore, and there it is. So it's telling us that it's type float. Okay. By the way, here's a thinking exercise. So what would happen if you typed $float equals 10? Do you think you would get an int or a float type? So maybe just have a think for that for a moment, and then you can go ahead and have a go. So a $float equals just 10. And then let's check out its type. And as you can see, it's been classed as an int. So it's not the variable name that matters. It's actually the type that you've entered, whether it's a 10 or a 10.0. Okay. Now I would like to introduce another data type called a string or an str. So the data type str is used for storing strings in memory. And when I say a string, I mean anything with these apostrophes on either side. So let's have a look. So you can go ahead and use your own name. So let's create a variable first name equals, and then we have to put in these apostrophes. Right? So you could say Ada, put in your first name, last name, Lovelace. Now you can check that your variables have been created correctly. By the way, for those of you who are interested, Ada Lovelace is known for writing the first computer program. It's working on Charles Babbage's machine. So the first program was actually written by a woman. She's very famous. There was a whole exhibition devoted to her at the Computer Science History Museum. Yeah, so if you're interested, very inspirational figure. So you've put in some first name, some last name, and now we're actually going to go ahead and print both of those. So far, you know, we've just printed like hello world, or maybe we've done print dollars. We're actually going to print the first name, so the variable, and we're going to put a comma to denote we're going to enter another variable, and then we're going to put the last name like this. And then you will see Ada Lovelace being printed, one variable after the other. And when you use print like that with a comma, it will give you a space automatically. Okay. So just to recap, we've done an integer data type, we've done a float data type, and we've done strings. Let me just see. I think it's important because I think we're going to come to that here. But when you're working with strings, like for example, if I said a equals 2, and then I do type A, right? So that's class integer. But if I said B equals apostrophe to apostrophe, and then I do type B, that's a string. So even if you put an integer into this apostrophes for string, you're still going to get a string. And that's what this slide is going to talk about here. So, you know, we can put a very simple math formula that results in an integer, first of all. So we could say print 2 plus 3. So we're using our plus sign operator. And that will give us 5. Now, if we said print 2 plus 3 like so, then that will give us a string, right? 2 plus 3, the string. But what's really nice here is that you can actually tie it all together. So you could have 2 plus 3 equals 5 like so. So you could say print, you know, 2 plus 3, and then you want to put your comma to separate out your variables in your print, and then there's no apostrophes to, oh, and I forgot the equals. By the way, this is a nice thing. If you press the up arrow, it will take you to your last command. So I can just pop my equals back in, and there it is. Great. So as well as addition, you can also do multiplication with the asterisk. So you can say 2 times 3 with the asterisk like so. And we'll come to more of those operators as well, I believe, next lesson. So now that we've covered data types a little bit, let's come back to revisit variables. So remember that we said a variable is a name that represents or references a value stored in the computer's memory. All right. Now this value can be of any type. So it can be an integer, it can be a float, it can be a string, and it can be some other data types that we haven't covered yet. Now, let's have a look at reassigning variables to a different data type versus actually converting between different data types. So there's a bit of a difference. So let's first of all have a look at this example. So reassigning a variable to a different data type. So we can check it out together. So we can say something like x equals 99. So we can say x, or we can say print x. The interactive mode doesn't matter. And then we can assign extra string. So we can say now x equals, don't forget your quotation marks. I should be saying quotation marks. So I say now I am assigning x to a string. Great. And then we look at x. Now I am assigning x to a string. That is the value of it now. So what's happened is, just like before when we had the dollar sign, x is no longer referencing 99. It's referencing this string. And some point, Python will come along and garbage collect the 99. Now let's look at data type conversion, because, and if you've done Java or something like this, you'll have heard it being referenced as casting. So let's have a look at simple versions like converting an int to a float and a float to an int. So in order to do this, we need to use a couple of Python built-in functions. So int and float are the built-in functions. So let's have a look. So for example, let's say, let me bring this in a bit. Okay, so let's say we'll start with a variable. We'll call it float value equals, let's say equals 3.7. And we can check it. There it is. And let's check its type as well. So we know that float value has type float. Then let's create a new variable, int value. And now what we're going to do is we're going to convert, or if you're familiar with cast, so we're going to say int. So we're going to use the Python built-in function int, and then we're going to pass in this variable float value as a argument. So now let's check out int value. And you can see now this float value 3.7 has been truncated. So if we actually look at the type of int value, you can see it is classed as an integer. So what's happened here is that we've had this float value 3.7, and now we're creating a new variable int value that's going to have this value 3. So the int Python built-in function int has truncated the floating point argument. It's just taken off the 0.7. So it doesn't round up or anything like that. It just truncates. But notice here that float value is still referencing 3.7. So if you go back here and you check float value, it's still referencing 3.7. So it's not that you've assigned float value to a new value, we've created a new variable int value, and we've assigned it the int version of this. And we can also go ahead and try the opposite. We can try converting an int into a float. So remember, we have our int value, which is currently at 3. So if we wanted to, we could say float int value, and you can see then it returns it as 3.0. Good. Okay. So normally I would pause and ask for questions, but obviously we can't do that in the recording, but we can do that in class. So don't worry, you can come and talk to me in class. I'm happy to answer questions. Now, we're also going to learn another very important function, a built-in function that you will be using all the way through the semester, and it's called input. So many programs that you're going to be writing will need some input to be able to perform some action or operation. So we're going to look at this input operation, and it reads in data that's basically been typed on the keyboard. So the idea is that it assigns some variable of value, and it says, so you say variable equals, and then you say input, and then you put in some argument or prompt inside of this function input. So let's do a very, very simple example. So let's say, so this is our variable. It's going to, so this is name is going to be our variable. Name equals input. That's our built-in function. Parentheses, quotation marks. What is your name? Question mark, quotation mark, parenthesis. Now, when I press enter, you're going to get a prompt. What is your name? Which is what we typed in here. So that's the prompt that we typed in. That's what we get. So I'm going to type out Countess Lovelace. That's Ada Lovelace's title. And you can type in your own name or whatever name you want. And then if we look at the name, you can see that it will be Countess Lovelace. Very nice. So now you've assigned this variable name with what your user, or you in this case, have just inputted. So input is a very powerful function that way. Now, there's something really key that you need to know about input. And you would be surprised how often students have forgotten this when later on when it's so fundamental. The input function always returns the user's input as a string, even if the user enters numerical data. So input will always give you type string. So let's try that. Let's have a look. So for example, let's look at type name here. You can see it as a string. And then let's try and enter a numerical value now. So let's say age equals input. How old are you? Oh, how old are you, Countess? Or how old are you? All right. I think she's over 202 years old now. Don't know how she. So let's put like 204 something, or your age. And then let's look at age, which is the variable we were inputting into. So there's 204. You can see the quotation marks. And then let's look at type age, and you can see it's class string. So this is not good, because what if you needed to do some mathematical operation on the numerical value that you just inputted? It's not going to be able to do that with a data type string. So this is where we put everything together that we've learned in this lecture. That's okay, because you can actually use the built-in Python function int to convert the string to an integer. So you could do it on two separate lines, but I want to show you this nested function call. So you put input, how old are you, inside of an int function call. So you convert whatever the input will be into an integer, and then the value age will be an int. So let's try that together. So age equals int, parenthesis, input, parenthesis, how old are you? And then you need to close with your two parentheses. So you say 204. Now let's look at age. Let's look at type age. And you can see it's classed as an integer. And that's because we've used this built-in Python function int here. And then finally, we've done all of this on the interactive mode. Let's actually go and do this in the script. So go ahead and open up Sublime and create a new file. You can call it age.py. And let's save this one in week 2 because this is officially for week 2. So you go to your documents, in class, week 2, and then you put the same line there, like age equals int input, how old are you? If you have any problems with this, we'll help you with this in class, don't worry. And then once you're done with that, you can exit out of your interactive mode. I'm going to clear all this. And I'm going to go up a directory because I'm going to go back into in class. And then I'm actually going to go down into week 2 in one line. You can do it in 2 separate lines if you want. So did I not have this? Oh no, I actually saved this in a different file because this was my example one. I'm gonna have to go and run it in a different file. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna just save it in the place where I'm trying to demo it to you because I created this one just as an example. So let's go to CS 110 in class, week 2. Great, I save that. Yay! All right, so then if we do a list, you'll be able to see it, age.py. And I'll do Python 3 age.py. How old are you? 204. And that's it. It's not printing it out. What we can do as well is we can add another line and say print age like this. And in fact, what we could do is age is, and then put a comma. So we're printing 2 arguments like this, save it, and then we run. And then when we ask how old are you, it prints the age is, and then whatever the input was as well. Great. So we'll definitely take questions because there's a lot covered here, and it's all very important that you know, and there's a lot of nuances here. So the more you practice, the more you'll get used to it. So there's nothing for you to do after listening to this, but if you want to have a look, I've actually posted in class exercise 1 that's due on Wednesday night. So don't worry, you can just come to class and start it there if you wish. But I just wanted to go over the questions so you can start it if you wish. So you're going to be submitting 3 files. So each one, you know, is a, you know, you can go to Sublime, open a new tab, and then, for example, for the first question, it's called name.py. So it's very important that you call it the name. I always give you the name of the file. So you'll go ahead and you'll call, you know, this name.py, and you'll save it in week 2. So write a Python program name.py that does the following. Ask the user to enter the first name, ask the user to enter a family name, and print the first name, family name together. So you're doing all of this on the script. You're not doing this in interactive mode, just to be clear. Then the second Python file, so adding 2 to user input. So write a Python program add2.py that takes a user's input into a variable and adds 2 to it. So here's a possible algorithm. Ask for input for an integer, call the variable x, add 2 to x, print out the value of x plus 2 is, and the value of x plus 2. And the last one is convert dog years to human years. So each year of a dog's life is equivalent to 7 years of a human's life. So write a Python program, dogyears.py, that converts dog years to human years. So you can ask for the input for the dog's age, like dog's age or dog age, print the human years on the screen in this format, age in human years, and the dog's age calculated in human years. And there's an extra credit for 1 point. If you want, you can say, find what is the command to find the Zen of Python in the Python shell. You can enter your answer at the end of your dog-years.py file as a comment. So for comments in Python, so I'll just show you, you always use this hashtag. This is a comment. So the interpreter won't run that. So you can put, you know, a hashtag sign and then write answer to EC is, and then I'd also like to enter your favorite line from the Zen of Python. So favorite line from Zen of Python is, and the Zen of Python is really to pass on the spirit of what the creator of Python was thinking about when it was created, because it is a very simple and elegant programming language. So no need to worry about this. If this is all overwhelming, just come to class, ask questions, put your name on the queue, and we'll work with you one-on-one. And you can have the whole of class to work on this, and office hours as well. So I look forward to seeing you in class.